Imagine this. It's November 1545 in the highlands of central Mexico. An Ahua farmer wakes up before the sun, his body racked with a sudden, violent illness. He stumbles out of his simple adobe house, the cool morning air offering no relief, and vomits a terrifying stream of black blood onto the very maize field he had so carefully planted just weeks before. By sunset, he's dead. By the next sunrise, his wife and all 5 of their children are gone too, their bodies lying still beside his. This isn't an isolated tragedy. Within a month, this exact same scene of horrifyingly swift death repeats itself in every valley, from the Gulf Coast to the shores of the Pacific. It's a wave of death so sudden, so complete, that the few who survive can only give it a simple, chilling name in their Nahuatl language: Mayaning, simply the pestilence. The scale of this catastrophe is almost impossible for us to comprehend today. Accounts from historical documents like the Florentine Codex describe entire towns emptying out. In a matter of days, bodies were left where they fell in doorways, on rooftops, even slumped in canoes floating down the river because there was no one left alive to perform the burials. The Spanish friars who witnessed this apocalyptic event wrote letters home to Europe, their words dripping with horror. One wrote, "The Indians are dying so fast that we cannot baptize them quickly enough." They were literally watching a civilization disappear before their eyes. Modern demographic studies, like those published in the journal PNAs, and later confirmed by the prestigious Max Planck Institute, paint an even grimmer picture. Researchers estimate that between 5 and 15 million indigenous people died across central Mexico in just 3 short years. To put that in perspective, this was a population drop of 60 to 90% in the hardest hit areas. That is a mortality rate proportionally worse than Europe's Black Death and the devastating smallpox epidemic of 1520 combined. In some highland provinces, the death toll reached a staggering 80%. Think about the loss. Entire language groups, unique craft traditions passed down for generations, entire family bloodlines all vanished from the face of the earth forever. The Spanish conquerors, who had spent the previous 25 years subduing the region, suddenly found themselves as rulers of a ghost land. They now presided over a landscape of silent towns and abandoned pyramids. The symptoms of Cocoliztli were the stuff of nightmares. It began with a high fever and a violent, splitting headache. Then came nosebleeds that refused to stop. The victim's tongue would turn black, their skin a sickly yellow from jaundice. The final stage was a massive internal hemorrhage, with blood pouring from every orifice of the body. Death was a certainty, usually arriving within 3 to 4 days. Eyewitness accounts collected by the friar Bernardino de Sahagun described how the dying turned the color of dried maize leaves, their bodies racked by unstoppable bleeding from their eyes, ears, and anus. The Spanish physicians, with their European medical knowledge, were completely powerless. The indigenous healers, who had centuries of experience with local ailments, were equally helpless. Even the priests, rushing to administer last rites to the dying, would often collapse and die mid-prayer, struck down by the same invisible killer. For nearly 500 years, the exact cause of this terrifying pestilence remained one of history's greatest medical mysteries. The CDC's Historical Epidemiology Unit classified Cocoliztli as one of the deadliest virgin soil epidemics ever recorded. But the pathogen itself was unknown. Was it a form of hemorrhagic fever like Ebola? A new strain of influenza? The answer remained buried with the victims. Then, in 2018, came a breakthrough that stunned the scientific world. A team of researchers led by Johannes Krause at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History was working at a mass grave site in Oaxaca at a place called Tepes. They carefully extracted ancient DNA from the teeth of the buried victims. Teeth are like a time capsule for pathogens, protecting their genetic material for centuries. And what they found was astonishing. The culprit was Salmonella enterica, specifically a serovar known as Paratyphi. Today, this is an extremely rare strain of enteric fever. But the key difference is that this specific strain can cause the horrific hemorrhagic symptoms described in the 16th century chronicles. It was the perfect match, the smoking gun that solved a half-millennium-old cold case. This ancient strain is almost extinct now, but its closest modern relatives are only found in remote parts of South Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. So, how did it get to Mexico in the 1540s? The most likely theory points to the same vector that brought smallpox and measles to the Americas. European ships. It was likely carried by infected sailors or in contaminated food or water supplies from the Old World, a deadly stowaway on the Columbian Exchange. The arrival of this new bacterium coincided with a perfect storm of environmental conditions. A severe drought had gripped Mexico from 1544 to 1546. This meant widespread famine, which weakened the immune systems of the population. It also forced people to crowd together in refugee camps near the few remaining water sources, creating ideal conditions for a disease that spreads through contaminated water and food. A vulnerable population, a new and deadly pathogen, and a climate disaster, all combined to create a biological firestorm. The accounts left by Spanish chroniclers are still shocking to modern In the city of Cholula, once a thriving metropolis of over 100,000 people, only a few hundred survivors remained by 1548. Its Great Pyramid, the largest man-made structure on Earth by volume, stood silent, its temples abandoned to the wind. Another friar, Toribio de Benavente, wrote about his travels through the devastated landscape. We walked 4 days through towns where not a soul stirred. The houses were full of the dead, some still seated at their matates. As if grinding maize, it was a world frozen in the moment of its death. In the Mixtec highlands, entire kingdoms collapsed. The Spanish found empty palaces with gold and precious objects still sitting on the altars because there was simply no one left to steal them. The demographic catastrophe was so absolute that the entire colonial economy nearly ground to a halt. The lucrative silver mines in places like Zacatecas stood idle because there were no laborers left to work them. The encomienda system, Spain's brutal engine of exploitation based on indigenous labor, broke down completely. There were not enough indigenous people left to exploit. The situation was so dire that the Viceroy of New Spain himself wrote a desperate letter to the King of Spain, Charles V, in 1545, pleading, "If God does not cease this pestilence soon, there will be no Indians left to serve His Majesty." The numbers tell the story. The population of central Mexico, estimated to be between 15 and 25 million people when courts arrived in 1519, plummeted to barely 1 to 2 million by the year 1600. Cocoliztli was the single largest contributor to this staggering collapse, a demographic event unmatched in human history. Even today, archaeologists continue to uncover the sheer scale of the tragedy. Mass graves at sites like Tepescalia Lucunda reveal hundreds of bodies thrown in without ceremony, a testament to the chaos and despair of the time. The ancient DNA recovered from these sites provides undeniable proof of the Salmonella paratifi C infection. And this story isn't just a piece of history. The CDC actively monitors paratifi C because, while it's rare, it still exists. More worryingly, it is becoming increasingly resistant to antibiotics. A 2023 paper published in the medical journal The Lancet issued a stark warning. It argued that modern climate change, causing severe droughts and displacing large populations, could recreate the very conditions that allowed Cocoliztli to explode in 1545. It could happen again, in vulnerable regions around the world. It's a sobering thought. One drought, one ship, one microscopic bacterium that had never before seen the Americas. The result was the near-total erasure of entire civilizations in 3 short, terrifying years. The story of Cocoliztli is a powerful reminder of the fragility of human societies and the devastating power of disease. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating and important as I did, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the forgotten corners of history. See you next time.
Subscribe today. Click the button now.